to use the SCO Summit platform to justify the bloody war against Ukraine. Putin had his own plans and calculations in China. He tried to shift all responsibility for the tens of thousands of victims and the Ukrainian cities wiped off the map onto Kiev and Western countries. At the same time, he portrayed the Kremlin's aggression not as an attack, but, I quote, as a response to the actions of the US and their allies. However, the Russian dictator was unable to impose his position on the member countries of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Putin devoted most of his speech at the SCO Summit to accusations against Kiev, the European Union, and the United States. He claimed that everything happening in Ukraine now is supposedly the result of a so-called coup d'état, imposed and supported by the West. And according to him, Russia is not the aggressor at all, but rather the victim, forced to respond to attempts, and I quote, to drag Ukraine into NATO. Then, apparently expecting support from the member countries, Putin tried to convince them that the SCO should become the foundation of a new security system for Eurasia. However, the final declaration of the summit enshrined the principles of non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries, non-use of force, and rejection of unilateral sanctions. Ukraine is not mentioned even once, directly, in this declaration spanning over 20 pages. For the summit participants, the priorities were issues of trade and multipolarity, not legitimizing Russia's actions.
We find it telling that the main final document of the summit does not contain a single mention of Russia's war against Ukraine. It is surprising that the largest war of conquest in Europe since World War II is not reflected at all in such an important and fundamental document, while a number of other wars, terrorist attacks, and global events are mentioned. The absence of any mention of Russia's war against Ukraine in the SCO Summit declaration is evidence of the failure of Moscow's diplomatic efforts. The Kremlin has suffered yet another defeat in its attempts to portray the world as divided in its assessment of Russian aggression against Ukraine. From the statement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Furthermore, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during a meeting with the Russian delegation in China, directly called on Putin to end the war against Ukraine and once again emphasized that India supports a diplomatic resolution to the conflict and is ready to make every necessary effort to achieve this.
We welcome all recently proposed efforts to establish peace in Ukraine and hope that all parties will approach this issue constructively. It is necessary to seek ways for a swift end to the war and the achievement of peace. This is a call from all of humanity.
It is telling that on the day of Putin's speech at the SCO Summit, Kremlin TV channels broadcast a video address from Viktor Yanukovych. The last time he appeared publicly in the media was in July 2022, when he called on Ukrainians to surrender to Russia. And now, all of a sudden, he claimed that he had always worked toward bringing Ukraine closer to the EU and was categorically against joining NATO. However, the fugitive president didn't resurface from obscurity for no reason. The Institute for the Study of War is convinced this move was also carefully planned and orchestrated by the Kremlin.
The release of Yanukovych's video on Russian state media was likely deliberately timed to coincide with Putin's statements. The Kremlin may be setting the stage to claim that Yanukovych, not Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, is the legitimate leader of Ukraine. However, such claims are false, since Yanukovych voluntarily left Ukraine after the Revolution of Dignity, and several democratic elections have been held in Ukraine since then. From the report of the Institute for the Study of War.
This Kremlin gambit failed just like the attempt to present Putin as almost the central figure of a multipolar world at the summit in Tianjin. There are still serious contradictions among the members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and behind the outward appearance of unity lie conflicts of interest and mistrust. In this complex geopolitical situation, Russia's weight and influence, especially after the full-scale war it launched against Ukraine, are becoming less and less significant.
Russia now plays only a secondary role in the SCO. Even though Vladimir Putin demonstratively stands next to Xi in Tianjin and again on Wednesday at the large military parade in Beijing, the roles are clearly defined. Moscow is seeking protection. Beijing is calling the shots. For Xi Jinping, this is a double victory. He is taking advantage of Putin's weakness to strengthen his own leadership, while at the same time portraying China as an indispensable force in Eurasia. From a publication by Handelsblatt.
Perhaps the only thing Putin managed to accomplish at the summit in China was once again showing the whole world that he has no intention of stopping the war against Ukraine. Moscow continues to insist solely on its own terms and shows no willingness to compromise. And even when the Kremlin dictator tried to present himself as a victim from a high podium, hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles were flying at peaceful Ukrainian cities.
Russia continues to carry out strikes. Of course, we will respond to this. We will respond, in particular, asymmetrically, so that Russia truly feels the consequences of its audacity. And we continue to work with our partners to put pressure on Russia. And it will happen. Russia hears nothing but strength and will keep lying until its losses are strong enough. All our partners understand this. It's important to have the determination to act. Additional sanctions that actually have an impact are necessary. Tariffs that restrict Russian trade and funding for the Russian war machine are needed as well. All of this is very much needed.
At the meeting with the Prime Minister of Slovakia, who, by the way, was the only European leader to come to China, Putin continued to threaten Kiev. The Kremlin dictator called on Robert Fico to impose an energy blockade on Ukraine. This included both the gas supplied in reverse flow and electricity. In addition, the Kremlin dictator promised to intensify attacks on Ukrainian energy facilities and cynically called these strikes a response to the Ukrainian Defense Forces' attacks on Russian oil refining enterprises. Even though it is Russia that has been systematically trying to destroy Ukraine's energy system since September 2022. And the first strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces on Russian oil refineries and oil storage facilities took place in January 2024. Our partners understand very well that in this way, Putin is trying to blackmail not only Ukraine, but all of Europe.
The threat from Russia is growing every day. Let's not be naive. One day, this could affect Luxembourg and my country, the Netherlands, as well. Right now, we are all safe. We think we are far from Russia, but in reality, we are very close. Especially in the context of the latest Russian missile technologies. For example, the difference right now between Lithuania and Luxembourg, The Hague, or Madrid is just 5 to 10 minutes. That's how long it takes a missile to reach these parts of Europe. So, we are all under direct threat from Russia. Right now, we are all on the eastern flank. Whether you currently live in the bustling city of London or the charming city of Tallinn, it truly makes no difference anymore.
Overall, Putin's trip to China showed that he will use any international platform not for dialogue, but as a kind of theatrical stage from which he can threaten the whole world. He did this both at the summit and during bilateral meetings. And diplomatic efforts to stop the aggressor are clearly still insufficient. But at the same time, it's clear that the louder the threats, the more Russia is trying to hide its vulnerable position in the exhausting war against Ukraine.